Hey guys, it's Mr. Donnelly. Hope your quarantine is going well as a quarantine can go. For the foreseeable future, I'm going to post these videos to help you understand what is going on with the topics we still need to cover. You guys will still need to complete your assignments on Google Classroom, but I hope the videos and my explanations within the content will help make this a little bit easier. So let's get started with supply. The first thing you have to realize about supply is that this is from the supplier's perspective, the business owners. Business owners are concerned with one thing and one thing only, making as much money as they can from the products they are selling. If you take that understanding to the curve, it will make sense. Price is still on the Y, and now quantity supplied is on the X. For suppliers, as price goes up, the amount supplied will also go up. If you think about this, it makes sense. You want to maximize your capability of making the most amount of money as possible. So what you want to do is make more of a product when the price is high and make less of a product when the price is low. Remember, the law of supply has nothing to do with the law of demand or the desires of consumers. When you think of supply, think like a business owners. There are similarities though shared between the law of supply and the law of demand. Both have separate rules of quantity supplied / quantity demanded and the law of supply and law of demand. Just like in quantity demanded, where the price is the only shifter, in quantity supplied, price is the only shifter, which as you can see on the graph, we are moving from A to B, and we can move from B to A, but we are not making a new curve. So again, when you see quantity in front of supply or in front of demand, the only shifter in play is price. That is the only thing that's moving up and down the original curve. Now, just like the law of demand, when we look at the law of supply, we need to recognize right away that price does not change. Price is going to remain constant. As a result, there needs to be an externality that is creating new supply curves. And of course, we're going to call those shifters, just like we did for demand. These are simply the shifters that we're going to look at as we continue to go through supply. Feel free to put those into your notes if you want to pause the video, or as we go through each shifter, you can throw those into your notes and make sure that you're comfortable with what each is asking. The first shifter we'll look at is cost of inputs. Cost of inputs are the costs or fees associated with producing a product. An example, if you are making tables and the cost of timber decreases, your supply curve would move to the right. The cost of the wood is cheaper. As a result, you can buy more of the timber and you can make more tables. Think about it in this way. If your operating budget was $100 and you could buy 10 pieces of wood, that's the cost of your inputs. But if the cost of wood decreased and for $100 you could buy 15 pieces of wood, you can now make more tables, shifting your curve to the right. The opposite would hold true if your cost of inputs increases. You would still have $100 for wood, but now a piece of wood costs $20. The number of tables you are going to be able to make is cut in half, moving your supply curve to the left. The next shifter we will look at is the number of producers. This one is easy. As more producers enter the market, the amount of supply is going to increase because there are going to be more people making the product. Clearly, the market for that product is good. Businesses see the opportunity to make money. As a result, they enter into the market. The supply of that product shifts to the right. The supply of a product can also decrease. If the market is showing that the product is not successful, there will be less producers of that product. There's no money to be made. As a result, we will see a new supply curve shift to the left, indicating a decrease in supply. Our next shifter is future expectations. With businesses wanting to maximize profit and revenue, they need to pay attention to what is happening currently and what may happen in the future. The best way to describe the shifter is through an example. Alright, so I am the CEO of an oil company. Currently, we are producing 100 barrels of oil a day at $65 a barrel, making $6,500 a day. It is projected that next year the cost of oil is going to increase from $65 to $100 a barrel. As a result of this projection, I am going to reduce the amount of oil for sale currently. I'm going to wait until the price increases. If I wait, I can go from making $6,500 a day to making $10,000 a day. As a businessman, that makes more sense. Because of my decision to wait, the immediate supply of oil is going to decrease, shifting to the left. Now, if the situation was opposite, and I saw that the price of oil was going to decrease from $65 to $50 next year, I would want to increase the amount of oil I was selling daily. I would increase my supply from 100 barrels to 200 barrels. Knowing that there would be a decrease in price in the future, I want to maximize the amount of money that I could make right now. As a result, the supply curve would shift to the right with the increase in supply. Mother Nature can also influence the law of supply. If I were a producer of orange juice, and there was a longer growing season in Florida for oranges, I would have longer access to oranges. As a result of this, I could produce more orange juice. This would shift the supply curve to the right for orange juice. We're not talking about oranges, we're talking about the final product of orange juice. Now the opposite would hold true as well. If the growing season was shortened and less oranges harvested, it would mean less orange juice produced. Less oranges harvested makes my inability to make more orange juice, which would move the supply curve to the left. Our next shifter is technology. New technology is always going to shift to the right. Better machines, new processes, just overall being more efficient. Because of this efficiency, there will be more products made and the supply curve will move to the right. The only way technology would cause a shift to the left would be if machines broke and products could not be made. Less products would lead to a left shift because there are less products. But this rarely happens, and technology is almost a guaranteed shift to the right. Our last and final shifter. Congrats, guys, we've made it. The role of government. If the government increases taxes on a business, this will impact their operating costs, and any increase will reduce the supply of the product. If the government reduces taxes, we'll see an increase in supply. Another way government can influence supply is through subsidies. A subsidy is when the government provides funds to a company to help with production. An example, if the government wants to increase the supply of windmills in the US, the government would provide a subsidy to windmill companies, increasing their potential to produce windmills because the government is giving them money. So a subsidy is always a good thing for a business to have. They're getting money from the government to produce a product. The opposite to this is when we saw with taxes. Taxes always hurt businesses. The higher the taxes, the less a business is going to be able to produce, simply because the taxes are going to impact their operating costs. So simply, subsidies are a good thing to get. Taxes are always a bad thing. Alright guys, feel free to stop here if you want and pick this back up tomorrow. I posted a shifter worksheet on Google Classroom I want you to work on. It will be due on Friday. Once you finish that, come back to this video and we can finish up supply. Welcome back guys, or congratulations to those of you who are getting this whole video done and over with in one shot. If you're that person, I tip my hat and salute you. So what we now need to do is analyze how supply and demand function together in the market. The first thing we need to do is look at the perfect relationship between supply and demand in the market, called market equilibrium. Market equilibrium is when supply and demand meet at the perfect price. With the perfect amount demanded and the perfect amount supplied, we call this market equilibrium. You can see this on the graph at point P0, Q0, the intersection point. Guys, market equilibrium is a unicorn in the economics world. You hear about it, it looks lovely, but you don't actually ever see it. The market normally functions in disequilibrium. Disequilibrium is the market's constant attempt to reach equilibrium. The first disequilibrium we see is excessive demand and limited supply. According to the graph, we can see that the price is too low. Because of the price being too low, we see too much demand. Of course, because consumers want to buy more when price is low. And limited supply because suppliers reduce the amount supplied when price is low. The situation that we find ourselves in is called a shortage. There's simply not enough of the product. So in order to get to equilibrium, following the graph, is we need to increase the price. When the price is increased, suppliers will supply more. As a result of the increased price, demand will decrease because people don't want to pay that price. As a result, the market will correct itself and reach equilibrium. The opposite of a shortage is the disequilibrium concept of surplus. Analyzing the graph, we can see that the set price is too high. Suppliers are doing what suppliers do, produce more because the price is high. The problem is that no one is buying it. Perhaps the product is elastic and the high price drives people away. In order to fix this, the price has to come down. Well, when the price comes down, less suppliers will make the product because the cost is lower and they can't make as much money. But because the price of the product is coming down, more people will buy it, increasing demand. In simple language, they made too much, they need to have a sale, and that balances out the market, finding its equilibrium point. The problem with disequilibrium and trying to find the equilibrium point is that it takes time for the market to correct itself. When that is the situation, we find the government is going to step in and help fix the problem in the market. So the first example of government intervention we are going to look at is called a price ceiling. Now, if you want to, you could click on the link above and watch the Mr. Clifford version of this explanation, or you can just run with me on this. Alright, so you're sticking with me. Good. So right off the bat, it's confusing because the ceiling is lower than the equilibrium point. But here's why we're going to call it a ceiling. If you look at the image, the ceiling price is well below the equilibrium point, but perhaps the equilibrium price is unfair to the majority of Americans. Think apartments in New York City. Most New Yorkers cannot afford to live in New York City because it is too expensive. The mayor of New York City steps in and puts a cap on the price of apartments, creating a ceiling. Prices cannot go above that point. Now you might be thinking, won't that create a shortage? And it may, but the point of government involvement is that there's a problem impacting the people, and the government acts and steps in to try to make it more fair. The next government intervention is the concept of price floors. Now we are seeing price floors above the equilibrium price. How can a floor be above something? And it's because floors are the price point that a product cannot drop below. Let's take an example that impacts each of you, minimum wage. The government sets the minimum wage price. According to our graph, minimum wage should actually be lower. Instead of making $11.80 an hour, perhaps the market thinks that you should only be making $9 an hour. Well, the government steps in and sets that the wage of any American cannot drop below the floor price of $11.80. It can certainly go above, but the law states that you cannot be paid less than the floor of $11.80 an hour. Alright guys, almost done. Let's look at the graph on the left. When supply remains constant and we see an increase in demand, clearly people want the good. As a result, suppliers will react by increasing the price. This makes sense. They're not making more of the product, just increasing the price, which increases the amount of money that they will make. Now, if we look at the graph on the right, we see high supply and constant demand. This scenario would happen if a producer thought there was higher demand for their product, so they made more. Well, there are not more customers buying the product. As a result, they need to decrease the price. This is a great thing for consumers and a bad mistake for producers. Continuing with a decrease in demand, looking at the graph on the left, the company keeps making the same amount of a product, but the demand for that product is decreasing. Let's use fidget spinners as an example. Studies prove that fidget spinners actually are nothing more than a distraction, and it does not meet the expectations people had. As a result, the demand for that product is going to drop. The problem is that the suppliers have already made a certain amount. As a result, the suppliers are then going to have to drop the price and try to move some of their product, essentially holding a sale because the product that they were making clearly has no more demand in the market. And finally, if demand remains constant and supply drops, this is a bad thing for consumers and a good thing for producers. Producers can increase the price because the demand is there. There's just not enough of the product. So now they can try and make way more money by increasing the price. Yet, if that's the case, there will eventually be more producers getting into the market because clearly they can see that there's money to be made. Okay guys, that's supply. On Classroom, you need to finish the following things: the shifter handout, multiple choice quiz, supply short answer questions. This will all be due on Friday. You have the week with no other work. Please reach out if you have any questions or problems. I will also post the script to the video on Classroom. I think that will help as well. So keep your spirits up. Hopefully we'll be back together in April and have a good end of the year. Take care, be safe, be healthy, and see you next week for our next lesson. Mr. D.